Hi, my name is Jacqueline, and my project is focused on genes that are involved with breast cancer. So, all men and women have specific genes which can lead to breast cancer, but you can only get breast cancer if you have a mutation in those genes. And there's a 50% chance you'll have a gene mutation if one of your parents has it. And so these genes are usually BRCA1 or BRCA2, but there are others like TNRCA9 and MAP3K1, but the two genes that are most common are BRCA1 and 2. And so these two genes normally fix DNA and take place in cell growth and mitosis. And so BRCA1 is located at the long arm of the chromosome 17 at position 21, and BRCA2 is at the arm of the chromosome 13 at position 12.3. And so BRCA1 starts at base pair 41,196,311 and finishes at base pair 41,277,499, and that equals to 81,188 base pairs long. BRCA2 starts at base pair 32,889,616 and finishes at 32,973,808. 808, and so that equals to 84,192 base pairs long. So scientists have concluded that during the most important times of developing, which would be puberty, some factors that can influence the likeliness of getting a mutation are specific chemicals and products. For example, Long Island, New York had a high amount of people with breast cancer, partly due to the chemically polluted area. Not to mention food intake, less and or more, amount of exercise, and psychological mindset can all be factors on increasing the likeliness of getting the mutation. And so it's basically your overall health. And so the epigenome affects the gene expression by triggering the cancer. So BRCA1 protein is expressed as a nuclear and cytoplasmic expression in the cells in multiple tissues, and BRCA2 has no protein expression found. When it's expressed, you're more likely to get breast cancer, of course, and BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes code for BRCA1 and BRCA2 proteins. And so there are 1,863 amino acids in BRCA1 proteins and 3,418 amino acids in BRCA2 proteins. And so amino acids make the protein stable and help connect it to the molecules like BARDA1 and E2F1. And so that helps when fixing DNA. Cytosine and histone are some of the proteins that interact with BRCA1 and BRCA2 to help stabilize the structure. Although there is no trait, I chose BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes and the mutation or mutations that happen in these genes which lead to breast cancer. My mom had breast cancer, my great-grandmother had ovarian cancer, which is linked to breast cancer because ovarian cancer also occurs when BRCA1 or BRCA2 have mutations. And so learning about how parents pass on the DNA to their children and the process of going all the way back to creating reproductive cells helps understand how and why BRCA1 and BRCA2 can be hereditary. Not to mention the knowledge that we have about chromosomes and how they work and how many there are in our bodies and cells also help. Although there aren't traits, they are genes with mutations which can be passed down. And so one last thing I want to show is this video which summarizes everything you should take from this presentation.
All kind of on the same page and talk a little bit about some basics. So Dr. Offit, I think people think of breast cancer or ovarian cancer genetics as I have the breast cancer gene. But in fact, these are mutations. They're mistakes, if you will, in these genes. Tell us a little bit about sort of what these genes are and the mutations that we're talking about. And it's not just the two BRCA1 and 2 that we're so familiar with. There's quite a few others.
Yeah, no, it's what's interesting, and again, 20 years ago we thought, well, it's about 5 to 10% of breast cancer as the group of breast cancers that are strictly hereditary. We had the meetings, the genetics meetings in Boston just around the time of the World Series, so it was kind of fun being up there. For those of us that went to school up there, it was deja vu. And one of the presentations at the genetics meetings was from the Scandinavian Twin Registry, which used to be 40,000, is now 130,000 twins, identical twins registered, and they do this in the Scandinavian countries. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because now our number of how much breast cancer we think is due to heredity is higher than we thought before. So it's probably for breast cancer now between 25 and 30% of it is familial. And by the way, the numbers for other cancers are surprising too. The prostate cancer number is incredibly high, like 50 to 60% now, which is really striking. And so we're still learning on the planet Earth, about our biology. And in the Scandinavian countries, we're learning due to these twin studies. So if 30% of breast cancer is due to these hereditary factors, how much of that is BRCA1 and 2? Well, very little of that are due to these genes that are on the front page of Time magazine and that the Supreme Court is arguing about and that all of you are thinking about. It's a very small proportion of that. Just a couple of percentage points of the population will have these mutations. With some exceptions, the Ashkenazi Jews, we think breast cancer in Ashkenazi Jews, if you're, say, before the age of 35, about 30% of all of that will be due to BRCA mutations. And we actually found that. And the other striking finding is that ovarian cancer in Ashkenazi Jews, over half of that is just due to BRCA1 or 2. So in some groups, it's high, but by and large, for all of familial breast cancer, the tip of the iceberg is BRCA1 and 2. Now, these are genes that you have in your bodies. We all have BRCA1 and 2. And even my wife, who now corrects her radiology reports and says, this woman has BRCA1. Well, everybody has BRCA1. Every man has BRCA, but it's a mutation that causes the problem. Now, there are a list of about another 20 genes that are related to BRCA1 or 2 that we're going to be testing for over the next few weeks, believe it or not, as part of our panels. And Emily is spearheading this effort. So first we've been testing a couple of genes. Now we're going to have 20 or 30 genes, maybe 40 at one time. And then behind that are a whole other group of genetic risk factors that are going to take us another few years to work out. So to get to this whole 30% piece of the pie is a work in progress. But right now, as we speak, we're transitioning from just testing for 2 genes to testing for about 30 genes. And we're not exactly sure how that's going to work because it takes about 2 hours to be in the room with Emily and me now, and we can't make that 2 times 30.
So you mentioned that, just so we're clear here, that the overall percentage of familial breast cancers that's due to BRCA1 or 2 mutations is, less than 10%?
So for breast cancer, if you have 3 or more cases of breast cancer in your family, so familial breast cancer, we think only about a third of that very strong breast cancer is due to BRCA. That means 2/3 or maybe 3/4 in some estimates are due to not BRCA. So even the very, very strongly hereditary breast cancer, the majority of that is not BRCA. If you have ovarian cancer mixed with breast cancer in your family history, we think the majority, some think all of that is due to BRCA1 or 2. So you put breast with ovarian, that's the BRCA. And as we will get to shortly, as you know, the big elephant in the room that was not in the Angelina story was, what about her ovaries? And we'll get to that shortly, because ovarian and breast, that's BRCA. So we think the majority of breast and ovarian is BRCA. But if, it was just your cousin that had breast cancer and, say, an aunt, but not this very strong pattern in your sister, your mother, or your father's sister, your father's mother, those are also hereditary, but not BRCA and not these other genes. So BRCA accounts probably for about a third of the very, very strongly hereditary breast cancer, maybe all of the hereditary breast and ovarian cancer.